Hey there, Rick Sage, recording at the Rimrock Studios in Bishop, California. Welcome to Season 2 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, where I speak with retailers, brand managers, athletes, executives, and others in the outdoor biz and share their stories, tips, advice, productivity tricks, and ideas you can use to take your career or business to the next level. If you need flexible small business financing, Kabbage has the answer. Kabbage helps small business owners access capital right away without any headaches. Apply online or from your phone. You'll get an automatic decision and you can use any amount you need when you need it. Kabbage has supported over 130,000 small businesses with $4 billion in funding. Visit Kabbage.com/outdoorbiz. When you qualify, you'll get a $50 Visa card that you can use anywhere. That's Kabbage with a K. KABBAGE.com/outdoorbiz. I'm excited to be speaking with Gordon Seabury on the show today. Gordon tells us about how he landed at Toad and Co. and his experience there, his time at the OIA, and his love for surfing. Enjoy. Hey, Gordon, welcome to the show. It's good to be with you this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so you were just telling me you're still rehabbing your leg, huh? That's going pretty well, sounds like. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I haven't broken anything in many, many years. And it used to be in a cast, and the rehab was slow and steady. But 10 weeks later, after a broken leg, I'm just about running full weight, full speed.
Great. So yeah, they get you up and at 'em. That's good. Yep. So tell us about your first exposure to the outdoors. How'd you get into the outdoor industry, or just loving the outdoors like you do?
So, I think a couple different data points. I thought back of my parents, for one, for sure. We camped as kids. My parents were really big in first tent camping, and then we actually had a travel trailer when they got probably older and didn't like the tent setup. But so we did a ton of camping around the East Coast when I was growing up. And when I was young, I was in the Scouts, and actually was an Eagle Scout before the age of 14. And
wow.
It wasn't a particularly popular thing to be, but we had a great scoutmaster that just loved adventure travel and just getting out. And so we would do these 50-mile foot of floats in the Adirondacks, and just some really cool whitewater rafting and fun adventure climbing.
That's great.
So I think those probably two solidified my love for it. And then when I went to college, I was in the outdoor club at college, and just became a lifelong participant and enthusiast of our activities.
Right, that's awesome. And did you do any guiding or anything out of the Scouts and in the outdoor club, or what was your first outdoor job?
No, actually, believe it or not, Toad and Co. So
Okay.
It's been so funny when I thought about that. I'm like, probably most people worked on a retail floor or guided.
Right.
And,
right.
I just did it as fun. I fly fished and mountain biked and skied and so forth. But no, my first career move was to try to get into the industry, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was postgraduate school and wanted to be in a place that really mattered, that I could blend passion and profession. And I also loved the outdoor ethos and what the industry was doing for the environment at the time. This is back in the late 80s, 90s. Right. And so I happened upon Toad and Co. or Horny Toad at the time, and didn't know the first thing about apparel, but loved the outdoor industry. And
how'd you find them?
So a college buddy of mine is now married to the founder. Who was back in the mid-90s making these really cool fleece hats out of her basement design studio in Telluride.
Right.
And so we got connected. I had put out the word that I was looking for an outdoor startup of some sort, or looking to get in the outdoor industry amongst my network of friends. And we didn't have LinkedIn or Facebook back then. So
we barely had email back then.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we might have.
Yeah.
And it just got introduced, and one thing led to the other, and she was going to sell it as a retail store in Telluride. I convinced her to sell it to me and be our designer for 2 years to launch it as a national branded outdoor retailer. And away we went.
And were you in Colorado, or did you move it to Santa Barbara?
No, so I was in Chicago at the time with my now wife, girlfriend at the time from graduate school. We had moved from Philly together, and I was a consultant, so I had a day job, and then I was writing the business plan and raising money at night.
Wow.
And then, like I said, we launched in '96 at Outdoor Retailer, and because there was still a textile industry domestically and in Chicago at the time, we split operations. We had a small operation in Telluride, including opening a store, and then I stayed in Chicago and kind of commuted between the two for Probably 2 years we split operations. Then we centralized operations in Chicago with a store in Telluride, and then some ex-Patagonia folks working out here in Santa Barbara. And that's how we ended up here in 2001. We brought on an investor who wanted to, really suggested we get everybody under one roof. We looked at the Front Range, we looked at Colorado, Bay Area, and here. And because we had a couple of people working here that were really important to us on the product and the production side, we uplifted from Chicago and Telluride and moved everything here.
Wow.
And a little over 15 years ago now.
15 years, so you must like Santa Barbara better than Chicago. The weather's better anyway.
It's pretty spectacular. Yeah. I remember my last run in Chicago was moved in April, and it was probably the beginning of April. And I remember running on the lakefront and seeing my shadow, or the breadth of my shadow, of my being the same density as my silhouette of my body.
Jeez.
And I said, this is the last, I can't wait to get to a year-round place to be able to be outside.
Exactly. And surf. Do you surf also?
I do, yeah. We learned when we got here. So my wife and I, once our kids started surfing, we jumped in and we're addicted. I never thought that I would be jealous about something when I was in the mountains skiing and snowboarding. And surf is the only thing that I look over my shoulder and check to make sure I'm not missing good surf.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty fun. I did it as a kid in high school, but I never got into it that much. I don't know why, but
it's kind of one of those things that either grabs you or it doesn't. And it's funny, for both my wife and I, it really just took. My kids, not really. So far,
interesting.
They're kind of warm water, fair weather surfers, but we go right through the winter and the coldest of mornings.
Wow, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah. So you've been there obviously since almost the beginning. What are some of the biggest challenges you guys have had? Obviously moving and getting everybody together, but what are some other ones?
Yeah, so, I think in the early days, it's kind of a combination of just navigating the startup challenges. Mm-hmm. Funding is always a challenge, particularly with a working capital intense business like apparel. Yeah. Figuring out how to convince investors to give you money, and then ultimately, when you get profitable banks to give you money, is always a tricky and difficult part. I think the one that I didn't really, and I knew that would be challenging. Yeah. I think the one I didn't understand fully, and most entrepreneurs that have to deal with supply chains don't. If you're in the tech world, it's kind of nice. If you're dealing with software, you don't have to deal with manufacturing. But the supply chain is incredibly complex and is wrought with challenges. And particularly when you're small, you don't have experience or leverage. Mm-hmm. And so, it's a miracle. I always say, we've been almost out of business probably more than a half dozen times. But in those early days, some of the things that I was telling somebody the other day, we had a fabric that was 25% of our entire collection for the year, a month late. And instead of the factory in Europe airing the freight, the shipment like they were supposed to, they put it on a boat the wrong way around the world. So we almost had to pluck a container off a ship in Singapore, which again,
holy cow,
we were barely a 7-figure company at that point. And so, and there's so many places along the way that, you have those moments. We tried to go 100% organic cotton right after Patagonia made that move. And I think it was the late 90s. And realized very quickly that our supply chain, unlike theirs, wasn't going to be able to support the kind of quality and the consistency of fabric and so forth. And again, nearly put us out of business. But our customers, thankfully, were forgiving enough, just at least for the effort.
Right. They're sticking with you. Yeah, no, that can be a big challenge. Not only the timelines, but like you say, if something goes south, boy, it can really back you up.
And that never changes. There's always, as you continue to innovate and, push the envelope on sustainability and push the envelope on construction ideas and so forth. And just, you're always running into supply chain challenges. So that's, I think one that really was tough. I mean, at the most fundamental level, when we arrived at Outdoor Retailer in '96, no one understood why we were there, because we were an outdoor lifestyle apparel company, which, if you remember back in those days, if you weren't an equipment company or a technical outerwear company, you belonged in the fashion business. And we kept saying, no. The Gen X and younger generations are going to love the idea of having performance product that looks good and feels good, and it's not necessarily equipment. So it took probably the first 5 years of just being an Outdoor Retailer to convince people that it made sense to have brands like ours and Prana's and Cool. It was the three that survived.
Yeah. Look how big they are now too. It's amazing. Most of the show is that these days.
Yeah, no, I mean, and almost every brand, that's their growth engine. That's
right,
really the opportunity for growth. So it's changed quite substantially. And this younger generation of millennials is even putting more fuel on the fire. And really, I think they reflect very much what our brand has always thought should be outdoor, which is certainly accomplishment and suffering is part of outdoor accomplishment was the baby boomer ethos.
Right.
But having a social event with a couple of couples walking through the nature and having a great hike is equally valuable and really the best way for the outdoor industry to embrace and build growing participation and diversity and so forth. So we've always had ukuleles in fields with couples as our visuals.
Yeah.
It's just taken about probably 10, 15 years for that to actually.
Well, the younger generation too seem to be a lot more demanding of the sustainability of the products.
Yeah.
And we always, back in the day, everybody talked a good game, but we really didn't demand it of the brands. Now they demand it. They will shut you down if you don't have the right sustainability.
No, and I love that. And, when I got into business, one of the big reasons I like I said, got to the outdoor industry was because it had already embraced the environmental concept. But this idea of triple bottom line businesses were very rare. I mean, I was in business school. I was a member of Students for Social Responsibility, and it was, literally Ben and Jerry's, Stonyfield Farms, Patagonia were probably the big three. And, maybe there were a handful of other brands that were thinking about more than just financial gain. And now, it's almost if you don't have a fundamental cause and an approach to sustainability and sustainable supply chain, you don't really have a future. So it's great to see that transition and really see the young generation of consumers both be able to be informed because technology is transparent and allows you to really get in and see behind the curtain. But also just it makes for, when the movie WALL-E came out, I thought, what a brilliant, I mean, that is it. That is exactly it. We're going to run out of resources if we don't start thinking about it differently. And so for us, it's been, for me personally, it's been wonderful to see the transformation and see cause be such a big part of business in general. And, when we got to the industry, you had the environmental piece, in which I thought we'd come in and be leaders and realized very quickly there was tremendous leadership in sustainable business practices and supply chain, Patagonia, REI, there were lots at the time. And so we decided, okay, we can learn from these bigger, more established companies with many years of experience. And so we'll be best-in-class citizens and adopt, their best practices and just be the best we can be on the environmental side, which we've really, truly, stayed that course for 20 years, 20 plus years. So, but what was not happening was there was no social leadership. No one was doing anything with people. Now you have Big City Mountaineers, which is great. There's been some others along the way, but we co-founded a social mission in Chicago when we were still in Chicago called Planet Access, which was basically a group, a non-for-profit group in Chicago that provided housing, vocational training, art, and life skills for adults with disabilities. They were trying to create a kind of a social venture arm where they could make money and provide vocational training for their clients in ways that lessened the dependency on charitable donation and state funding. And so we co-founded Planet Access, which has been a fulfillment center for us for 20 years.
Oh, cool. They're still around then. That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
No, it's been 20 years. And it funds a great trips program. So those same adults with disabilities that are making money at the fulfillment center and are, in some cases going off to find independent living.
Oh, very
also
cool.
Get to go on their first vacations, which is pretty cool.
Wow. We'll link to that in the show notes. That's awesome. So what are you most proud of at Toad and Co?
I think
it's probably a lot of things, right? I mean, you guys have done so much.
I do think that social mission is probably definitely in the top three. I think it's one that, not just because we committed to it early and have walked the talk for so many years, but because we've navigated, that partnership with my counterpart, who's kind of like a brother to me. And it's just, I think it's 20 years now.
That's great.
We've been doing it. And, you go through the Great Recession, you go through 9/11, you go through all sorts of bumps in the road, and to stay shoulder to shoulder is pretty impressive. And so that program, I think, is one that is important. I think maintaining our vision from the beginning, really setting out to build a company that both mattered and that was going to evolve the outdoor industry's point of view and relevance to the 21st century and to this younger generation, and really keep the youth engaged has been important. And then probably third is culture. Just having the culture that we've built, which I always said from the beginning, your customer is going to get introduced to you most likely via your product. Then if you're lucky, they'll like your product and they'll read the hang tag, or now they'll go to the website and they'll get to learn about the brand. Right. And if that inspires them, maybe someday your most loyal fans will show up at your office and check out your culture. And if you don't disappoint, if you walk the talk and you don't disappoint each of those steps along the way, then you've really built a sustainable relationship and one that can last. And I think people that come to our office really are super impressed. It's not cubicles. It really looks like what you'd hope it would look like.
That's cool.
And the people that come here, we try to reduce the threshold from work and play as much as possible. So it doesn't feel like you have to be, anyone but yourself and so forth. So, it's been a fun ride so far, and the industry's just been really good to us. And
well, Dad, you're so spot on. I mean, that's pretty visionary to have that vision of the consumer and the culture adoption back then, because now it's obviously it's taken off, and you're right. It's the way that a lot of brands grow, but to have that thought back then is impressive. That's great.
Yeah, we're really good at being bleeding edge.
Well, what do they say? Sometimes first you get arrows in the back, but at least you were first. So,
right, there you go.
And you were also involved with the OIA for quite a few years. You most recently were board chairman. Is that right? Have that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
I've been. I started as the voice of youth. Sally McCoy and Steve Barker invited me to be on the board back when I have to look back. I think it was when I was maybe 29 or 30. I entered the boardroom, and they were really, they were visionary in that they really wanted to understand the Gen X point of view of outdoor and what that would be relative to the baby boomer. And so that's one of the reasons they brought me, and then along the way some others, to just be the specimen to dissect and understand.
The guinea pig. Let's study this kid. See what he's all about.
Yeah. And so, so I've been on the board a long time. I took a 3-year sabbatical because I had realized I came in as the voice of youth and had become the old curmudgeon who had been there, done that. And so I did take a break for a bit and then got asked to come back on the board. And have been on for probably this last stint, maybe 6 years, and was just chair. And I was really, as much as the chair job was pretty challenging in the current environment with the trade show and the public lands issues and everything that's going on that front. I felt like I owed it to that first generation and leaders like Sally and Skip Yao and Steve to do the same thing they did, make sure that the industry has an engaged youth and next generation of leadership, make sure the association is in a healthy spot and really continues to be the collaborator and keep the community cohesive, because you see so many industries just fall apart and really not have any sense of soul or community. And I think that's one thing that makes our industry so special, is that we really like working with each other and we do collaborate even though we compete. And, and I think, there have been times recently where there's been breakdowns between vendors and retailers, the whole omni-channel and direct-to-consumer trends are pretty scary for retailers. And so keeping that industry cohesive is so, so important. If it's going to be the place that we all we're fortunate enough to grow up in and spend our lives.
Yeah, it's good. We're doing a good job. I think I had Travis Campbell on the show a while back, and he said that we're in a pretty bumpy period for the outdoor industry. There for a long time, it was, relatively smooth sailing. I mean, we had 9/11 and recessions and things like that, but we didn't have so many political issues that are, compounding our just ability to do our job these days. It's really challenging.
There's a lot of noise.
Yeah, that's right.
Noise, no question about it.
So what's your perspective on the public lands challenges we're up against?
Well, I think, first of all, I think, Sally Jewell and the prior administration really were a pleasure for OIA to work with. And we are a bipartisan organization. We have great friends in Congress on both sides of the aisle, and probably an equal number. So what's nice about our relationships, it's not a political point of view, because most people, when you put economic engine and jobs and tax revenue in the same sentence with conserving the lands we recreate on as the economic driver, you can, give everybody the opportunity to be a friend of the outdoors, which is very few on the other side.
Yep.
So I think the good news is we're probably one of the very few topics and industries that are bipartisan. And in so doing, it gives us a more powerful voice, particularly in times like these. Yeah. Unfortunately, our relationship with the current administration and Zinke in particular has been pretty disappointing. I mean, we had hoped that the administration and Zinke would come in and, like many great outdoorsmen before them, think about our public lands through a Teddy Roosevelt lens. And that's been unfortunately not the direction they've chosen so far. And, we're hoping that things can change. But at the end of the day, I think the great news about what's happening right now is it is just solidifying and uniting not just the industry's voice, but a growing population of the next generation of people that just truly care about our public lands. And I think, while the federal level work that gets done in the next couple of years may not be as inspiring as what had happened in the prior 8 years, I think that we're going to be in a position as a united force to really make a difference long term. And I think the awareness and the engagement level says, volumes to what the future of public lands will be. I think in the meantime, OIA has been pretty smart, and I don't take any credit for this. This is Amy and some of her government affairs team and some of the board members that were closer to it. But we've shifted a lot of energy to close to home and, moving the ball on lots of public lands issues that are at the state and local levels.
Local level, right. Yeah.
It's really working incredibly well. We're making more headway than ever before, even in the current environment. So I think I'm pretty optimistic in the long term and just have to sort of do the best we can in the short term. And having been on the board for so long, when we used to go to DC, I remember in the early days of going to DC, we were, the tree huggers, and we'd be lucky, we'd be lucky to get a meeting with the intern or the assistant to the intern who had to forget who we were. And once we started to calculate our numbers and our economic impact and really do the jobs report and participation reports and so forth, it's really changed the game.
People started to take notice,
we're an economic force that also is good for public lands, for climate change, for the future of the planet. And I think that's going to be a powerful position for us to leverage over time.
The other cool thing that's going on too is we seem to be able to have, I know there's a lot of noise on social media and whatnot in the political sense, but there's a lot more conversation now going on between all the people that recreate on public lands, I think, than before. We're talking to the OHV guys, we're talking to the hunters and whatnot. And, that's going to help us move forward as well, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the biggest challenges that is being addressed is access, making it easier for people to access and really, the diverse populations that are starting to engage in the outdoors as well. Really exciting beyond just youth. Yeah. So I think, the more digital our lives get, the more in tune with nature we need to be to balance that. And I think it's just going to be when the recession hit, it was really interesting to see how a simplified life, where economic, it wasn't an economically prosperous period, really translated to more getting outside and getting back to the simpler pleasures in life. And I think that's going to hold true for a very long time to come.
Yeah, that's great. And what do you think listeners can do individually to help support the cause?
Having been pretty cynical about politics in my younger life, and I always
I'm
say,
the same.
And I think it's just like wisdom is actually realizing that many of the cliches that you've heard your whole life come true. You just have to have a certain
they were right.
See them. Yeah, exactly. I get it now.
Yeah.
I think, in simple terms, just getting involved, getting engaged, talking to your local congressmen and women and your local politicians and really educating yourself on what's happening, what issues matter to you.
Yeah.
Because, there's just, it's easy to sit on the sidelines and complain. And it's easy to actually think you can't have an impact and that your voice doesn't matter in the scope of 300 million people.
Right.
The reality is very few of those people lean in and get educated. And you'd be surprised at how much your voice really does matter. And particularly when it comes in a one-on-one forum or with a group of constituents. I mean, our politicians listen, but they if they're only hearing one side, they're going to end up behaving in ways.
Or if they're hearing from nobody, they're going to do what they think is right, which in some cases right now is scary.
Exactly. And so holding your politicians accountable, getting engaged, getting educated. I mean, I do think, and I've heard this many times prior, that this is the next great generation, and they're going to clean up the mess that the baby boomers and Gen Xers left behind.
Yeah.
And sometimes it wasn't always obvious, but the more days that go by, the more it starts to become pretty clear that there are going to be some changes. I mean, even the gun movement that we're seeing and the students, activating in a way that I think is going to be hard to ignore. And I think that translates to a lot of the issues we care about: climate change, our public lands, and just really doing what's right for the long term.
Yeah, no, I support that. Get involved. Yeah. And do you have any suggestions or advice for folks wanting to get into the outdoor biz, or maybe if they're already in, to grow their career?
Yeah, so I think in terms of getting in, I think it's a great time. And I wouldn't have necessarily said that 10 years ago, 8 years ago. I think 10 years ago, there was not a lot of young innovation, or there was no obvious next generation of brands coming in. And now the whole venture out section and just, so many new business models, new products. It's truly, it makes me feel old. You realize, okay, now there's a full generation below us that are adults, and I need to figure out exactly how they operate, because they have different views than maybe I do. Fortunately, in a lot of ways evolved in the right ways, but I do think so. So I think that's exciting. You've got this young energy, and I see it in companies too. I mean, probably in our office, I would say at least, I bet you almost 50%, but certainly 40% of our office is under the age of 30.
Wow.
And so there's no lack of enthusiasm and engagement for careers in the industry. But we're not, unfortunately, our industry is not like the investment banking industry or the consulting industry, where they have these very refined and honed recruiting engines where they go to colleges and they have a whole system.
It's a hack your way in. We've all hacked our way in. I think that's still the case. It's
still the case. And so my best advice is be proactive. Literally find out about the companies you're interested, about the areas you're interested, show up at the outdoor retailer show, or reach out and talk to the folks in these businesses, and, just make yourself known. And chances are, if you have skills and a passion, you're going to get an opportunity. So to me, I think that's the biggest thing. I think if you're in the industry, the opportunity is that, this second, what I'd call second generation. The first generation are getting to retirement age. Second generation has learned a lot, but we're not technologically savvy. We don't necessarily fully understand what the direct-to-consumer models are. And so there's so much innovation opportunity. So I think, treating the opportunity to have a career in the industry with a seriousness that says, this is a profession and I want to be best in class and I want to be the best I can be and enjoy everything that the industry brings, you'll go far.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, because we're a lot more, I'm going to use the term professional, than we were back in the day. I mean, back in the day, you opened a door, you sold some fleece, you hung an outdoor sign on it, and away you went. And now we realize we may not know how to study the analytics and all the data points that we need to be measuring, but we know we need to measure them. So, and there's a whole generation out there that does that with their eyes closed. I mean,
no question about it.
So,
I think there is so much opportunity, and I think the industry is going to continue to grow. I think we continue to be more relevant than ever. And I think if we get better at telling our stories and growing our audience, and we get more sophisticated in terms of our fashion style quotient, our sort of our business sophistication, I think there's a lot more opportunity for the industry to have influence across many other industries.
Yeah, that's good.
It's a great time to start a career in the industry.
Yep, I agree. Let's shift gears a little bit and lighten things up. We've been talking about some heavy stuff. Do you have any daily routines to keep your sanity? Like obviously you're getting some exercise with the broken leg, but anything else you do to keep sane?
So I mean, it's been a rough 10 weeks of
I can only imagine.
Restricted activity. So I've tried to figure out. I've been swimming and using a stationary bike, which are two of the most boring, painful things I could think of. But at least it keeps the mind rolling and keeps the physical shape at least manageable. But typically, I mean, my two favorite things to do in the morning are run on the beach with my dogs and my wife, and dawn patrol surf sessions.
Oh, cool. Nice.
And unfortunately, we can't control having surf every day, so the runs fill in when there is no surf. But I think those are probably the two things that are, most near and dear to my daily routine. I go to yoga and just keeping your mind active, reading in the morning. I spend a lot of energy trying to catch up on reading when my mind's fresh and kind of more in an innovative mode than it can be during the daily tasks.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you can absorb more in the morning. Sometimes at the end of the day, you're just wiped out.
Yep, exactly.
So do you have any favorite books that you read, or do you give books as gifts very often?
I have given books as gifts, not as a habit, but if I come across something that I really love, I do in my office quite a bit. If I come across an interesting book that I think is worth a read, certainly articles all day long. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think the E-Myth really holds up, and it was a book that one of my original investors gave me year one of our business, and they've done a couple of versions of revisiting it and updating it, but the E-Myth is a great entrepreneurial book.
That's a
Michael
good one.
Gerber. Good to Great as a business book is fabulous. I think it really, it's a comparative. It's Jim Collins comparing two virtually identical businesses in identical industries, one that was hugely successful and one that never made it and failed, and compares and contrasts what were the differences. And there's a lot of commonalities of what makes a company great.
He did a good job on that.
On the pleasure side, it's funny. 3 people have given me this book. I've read it since, and I love it. It's called Barbarian Days, A Surfing Life, which is kind of a story of the old school, basically the beginning of surfing, when it really kind of hit back in the 60s and 70s. And it's just a fascinating look and window into a time. But it's really well written. It's a long book, but it's a pleasure. And
I'll look that up. We'll link to those in the show notes too. What
any fly fishing book that I can come across, I don't get to fly fish enough, so
well, you're not missing anything up here this last year or so.
I know, man. I heard it's I was actually we're going to be up there in a couple weekends, and I was thinking about doing a float or getting on the Owens because everyone else is going to be on the mountain, and I won't be able to get on the mountain.
Well, there's still, I don't know if you've done their I don't know where they do this, but they float the lower O. You can get a guide trip down there, and they're still doing that. They're floating through where the fire was, and they're picking up fish. So I think that's the only way to fish that right now is the float.
Yeah, no, that's what Steve was saying. The fire. I didn't even realize that their fire had come through. So
it was burned all along that thing. Yeah. Do you have a favorite outdoor gear purchase under $100?
I don't. I'm so spoiled by Pro. I'm everything that I like is so high quality that $100 is hard to get. I mean, I'd say I'm a sucker for fly fishing gear.
Oh, right.
I mean, gear in general. I'm a junkie. I'm a gear junkie anyway. But fly fishing in particular, my wife always looks at my fly fishing stuff. She's like, "How could you possibly need that many flies?"
Yeah, right. Another rod, really? Yeah, that's all right. As we wrap up, is there anything you want to say to our audience or ask of our listeners?
I think. Maybe for those that are in the industry that are listening, I think it's really important for us to make sure we reach out to the younger generation and to more diverse populations. You hear that a lot, but I think it's, I saw a millennial talk a while back from a guy who I thought I knew everything I needed to know about the millennials, and he was really terrific. And one of the things that stuck with me was that there's never been a generation that has reached up and tried to figure out the older generation. They think they know better.
Right.
So it's the job of the older generation to be wise enough to come across the bridge and understand the younger generation and why they're going to be evolved from your thinking. And I think it's really important for the industry leadership and executives and folks that have been around to preserve what's special, is to make sure that we bring them in the fold, we build great leaders, just make sure that there's many more decades and generations to come. Mm-hmm. And then if you're not in the industry, and you're young and trying to figure it out, I mean, like I said earlier, just grab the moment. Mm-hmm. Don't sit and wait for somebody to knock on the door and say, "Hey, I got this great job at this outdoor brand." Pick up the phone, you really do the work to make your future your own. And I think most of us in the industry, some of us happened upon it, but most of us in one form or another pursued it, either because we were passionate as a hobbyist or because we wanted to have a career that wasn't suits and business dinners and had enough fun and authenticity mixed in.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. And where can people find you if they want to follow up? Is LinkedIn the best place, or?
Probably LinkedIn. And then, I'm Gordon at toadandco.com is an easy one to remember. And I love hearing from folks. So, definitely. All right, cool. If anyone wants to reach out to me via email, that's great as well.
We'll put that all in the show notes. Well, it's been a pleasure, Gordon. Thanks for chatting, and good luck with your leg.
Thanks for having me, and thank you. Yeah, it's just about, I should be surfing in 2 weeks if all goes well.
Wow, good for you. Great. Yeah, we'll hope to see you when you get up here.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'll let you know when we're coming up.
Sounds good. All right, have a good day.
You too.
All right, bye-bye. All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Gordon Seabury. You can catch up with him by email at gordon@toadandco.com. That's toadandco.com. You'll find links to everything we discussed in the show notes at theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/episode 88. Be sure to hit your favorite podcast app and subscribe today. Thanks for listening. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. I've used Audible for many years now. I'm on the road a lot, and Audible allows me to enjoy the great books I discover or are recommended by friends. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Start your 30-day free trial with Audible today. If you want more of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, you can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Be sure and go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com where you'll find all the episodes, show notes, and much, much more. Thanks for listening, and until next time, be sure to make time to get outside.